Jurassic Park 3 begins with a man who wants nothing to do with dinosaurs. Alan Grant has spent years trying to put Isla Sorna, Isla Nublar, and everything associated with them behind him. He is no longer the wide-eyed paleontologist who once walked through a field and watched a herd of Brachiosaurus move across the landscape. He is older, more skeptical, more isolated, and increasingly irritated by the way the public has turned dinosaurs into entertainment. And yet, somehow, this is the man who is about to walk back into exactly the nightmare he has spent years avoiding. That contradiction is the key to understanding the strangest film in the original Jurassic Park trilogy. Because Jurassic Park 3 is strange. It is strange in the way it was made, strange in the way it is structured, strange in the way it treats its characters, and strange in the way it sits inside a franchise built around enormous philosophical questions. Jurassic Park was about the arrogance of believing that science could recreate nature and then control it. The Lost World expanded that idea into a story about exploitation, corporate ambition, and humanity's inability to leave dangerous things alone. Jurassic Park 3 takes almost all of that intellectual weight and compresses it into one brutally simple objective: find the missing boy, survive the island, and get home. That sounds like a weakness. Sometimes, it absolutely is. But it is also what makes the movie so unusually efficient. The film does not spend much time pretending that its characters are going to solve the mysteries of existence. They are running. They are hiding. They are improvising. They are trying to understand which sound in the jungle means danger and which sound means something even worse is nearby. And then the Spinosaurus arrives. The moment this enormous predator destroys the familiar hierarchy of the franchise, Jurassic Park 3 announces that the old rules have changed. The Tyrannosaurus had become the symbolic face of Jurassic Park, almost a cinematic institution in itself. It represented the impossible creature that audiences had spent years learning to fear and admire. Replacing it was therefore more than introducing another dinosaur. It was an attempt to make the audience uncertain again. The question was whether that uncertainty was worth sacrificing one of cinema's most recognizable monsters. The film's answer is complicated. The Spinosaurus is physically overwhelming, aggressive, and presented less like a character than a natural disaster with teeth. The raptors, meanwhile, represent something completely different. They are not simply bigger or stronger. They are intelligent. They communicate. They remember. They appear to anticipate human behavior. And while the movie occasionally pushes their behavior toward the language of revenge, their real significance is more interesting. The raptors are the creatures that understand their environment better than the humans do. That idea quietly connects the entire movie. Alan Grant understands dinosaurs academically, but he does not understand this island as a survivor. Eric Kirby does not possess Grant's scientific credentials, yet he has spent months learning how to live among creatures that should have killed him. Billy Brennan understands paleontology and desperately wants recognition for his scientific ability, but his ambition leads him to make a decision that puts everyone at greater risk. The raptors understand their own ecosystem without needing laboratories, books, or corporate facilities. Different characters possess different forms of intelligence. And Jurassic Park 3 keeps asking which kind actually matters when the world stops behaving according to human expectations. There is another reason the movie feels so different. It is short. With a runtime of roughly 91 minutes, it is dramatically leaner than its predecessors. There is very little room for elaborate detours. Once Grant reaches the island, the movie moves almost continuously toward its next threat. That pace can make the story feel rushed, because in many ways it was. But it also creates a particular kind of momentum. Jurassic Park 3 often feels less like a traditional epic sequel and more like a survival thriller that happens to contain some of the most expensive creatures ever put on screen. That contradiction explains much of the film's reputation. Why does a movie with such obvious production problems remain so entertaining? Why does the screenplay feel unfinished in places while the creature sequences remain so memorable? Why does the movie sometimes appear to be improvising its own identity while simultaneously delivering remarkably confident action filmmaking? And why, after years of being treated as the weak link of the original trilogy, has it gradually developed a more forgiving audience? The answer may be that Jurassic Park 3 represents something larger than its individual flaws. It is the moment a blockbuster franchise discovered that continuing was not the same thing as evolving. The first Jurassic Park had Michael Crichton's novel underneath Spielberg's filmmaking. The Lost World had another Crichton novel, another Spielberg production, and the enormous cultural momentum of the original. Jurassic Park 3 had none of that foundation. It became the first film in the series not directly adapted from one of Crichton's novels, and that distinction matters. Suddenly, the filmmakers were not adapting a pre-existing story. They were inventing the next chapter while carrying the expectations of a franchise that had already become larger than any individual movie. And that is where the production history becomes almost as fascinating as the film itself. Before the finished movie became a rescue mission involving Alan Grant, Paul Kirby, Amanda Kirby, Eric, Billy, and a Spinosaurus, other versions of Jurassic Park 3 existed. Some were radically different. Some were stranger. Some were built around teenage protagonists and ideas that could have sent the series in an entirely different direction. The screenplay changed repeatedly, sometimes during production itself. The movie was moving forward while the story was still being figured out. That is not normally the recipe for a confident blockbuster. Yet somehow, Joe Johnston turned that unstable material into a film that rarely stops moving. And perhaps that is the first great irony of Jurassic Park 3. The story was uncertain, but the survival mechanics were remarkably clear. Alan Grant needs to find Eric. The Kirbys need their son. Billy needs to confront the consequences of his ambition. The raptors want their eggs. And every living thing on Isla Sorna wants to continue living according to rules that existed long before the humans arrived. That simplicity is important because it changes the emotional shape of the franchise. Jurassic Park asked what it would feel like to see dinosaurs. Jurassic Park 3 asks what it would feel like to be hunted by them. The distinction is enormous. In Spielberg's original, the first dinosaur reveal creates wonder before fear. The audience is given time to stare. The characters stare too. The film understands that the spectacle of resurrection is itself the emotional event. Jurassic Park 3 has almost no interest in lingering over that feeling. Its dinosaurs are rarely presented as miracles. They are obstacles, predators, territorial animals, and sources of immediate danger. Even its comedy reflects that change. Amanda Kirby screaming Alan into the wilderness is one of the movie's most famous running jokes, and on paper it seems almost incompatible with the darker mythology of Jurassic Park. But that tonal awkwardness is part of what makes the film so recognizable. Jurassic Park 3 is constantly shifting between family adventure, survival horror, creature feature, action comedy, and early 2000s blockbuster spectacle. Sometimes those pieces fit. Sometimes they collide. But they never make the film boring. And perhaps boredom was the one thing the filmmakers could not afford. To understand why this peculiar little sequel exists in the form we know, we have to look backward, before Alan Grant ever stepped onto Isla Sorna again. Because the strangest thing about Jurassic Park 3 is not that it feels unfinished. It is that the movie was born unfinished. The success of Jurassic Park created an obvious problem for Universal. Once audiences had experienced one of the most successful and influential blockbusters in modern cinema, there was enormous pressure to return to that world. The original had become more than a film. It was a cultural event, a technological milestone, a merchandising phenomenon, and a permanent part of popular culture. A sequel was inevitable in commercial terms, but creatively, the situation was far more complicated. The Lost World proved that the Jurassic brand could survive without Alan Grant, but it also demonstrated how difficult it was to repeat the emotional impact of the original. Spielberg returned, Jeff Goldblum took the lead, and the production became larger and louder. Dinosaurs entered San Diego. The franchise moved away from the isolated island mystery and toward a broader spectacle about animals colliding with civilization. That expansion created another problem. Where could the series go next? There were only so many ways to make dinosaurs dangerous. Another island. Another experiment. Another corporation. Another group of people who thought they could control nature. Eventually, those ingredients begin to repeat themselves. Universal announced development of a third installment while the previous film's success was still fresh. Steven Spielberg remained involved as an executive producer, but he did not return to direct. Joe Johnston, already an experienced filmmaker with a strong background in effects-heavy adventure cinema, eventually took the director's chair. Johnston had reportedly been interested in making a Jurassic sequel, and his relationship with Spielberg made the transition easier. But Johnston was not simply asked to reproduce Spielberg. That distinction became important. A sequel made by another director can easily become a tribute to the original director's style. Every shot starts trying to remind the audience of what came before. Every musical cue becomes nostalgic. Every suspense sequence imitates an earlier scene. Jurassic Park 3 largely avoids that approach. It is not elegant in the way Spielberg's films are elegant. It does not build long stretches of tension around characters quietly observing a threat. It does not devote large sections to philosophical debate. It is more physical, more direct, and more interested in movement. Johnston's filmmaking background suited that approach. His work had already involved large-scale visual effects, adventure storytelling, and practical spectacle. He understood that creatures had to feel like physical objects occupying the same world as the actors. The movie's best sequences are therefore not necessarily its most complicated ones. They are often the moments when a dinosaur seems to possess actual weight. That weight becomes especially important with the Spinosaurus. But before the Spinosaurus became the face of the movie's marketing campaign, the project passed through radically different versions. One early screenplay came from Craig Rosenberg and involved teenage characters. The concept was considerably removed from the Alan Grant story that audiences eventually received. Other ideas reportedly circulated involving unusual dinosaur encounters and concepts that were eventually discarded because they felt too far removed from the established identity of the franchise. The development process became increasingly complicated. The film had to be made, but the story was still changing. That creates a strange kind of blockbuster anxiety. The expensive machinery is already being assembled. Actors are being prepared. Locations are being developed. Creature effects are being designed. Yet the basic question remains, what exactly is the movie? Eventually, the rescue mission became the answer. Alan Grant would return. A missing child would provide the emotional objective. Isla Sorna would become the setting. The dinosaurs would become the primary source of escalation. It was simple enough to work. But simplicity and certainty are not the same thing. Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor became involved with the screenplay, helping reshape the material into the rescue story. Yet the production remained unusually fluid. The final film carries traces of that instability. Some characters feel as though they belong to a more elaborate screenplay that no longer exists. Some emotional developments happen with remarkable speed. Certain ideas appear, become important, and then disappear before they can fully mature. This is particularly noticeable with Billy. His scientific ambition is important enough to become a central moral problem, but the movie does not have enough time to fully explore it. His decision to steal raptor eggs is a serious violation of Grant's trust and a direct echo of the franchise's larger warnings about treating living organisms as scientific commodities. Yet the emotional consequences are compressed because the film has to keep moving. That is Jurassic Park 3's fundamental production compromise. Simplify the story. Maximize the dinosaurs. And keep the audience moving toward the next sequence. By 2001, the cultural environment surrounding the movie was also changing. Jurassic Park was no longer new. It was a landmark. The audience had already seen dinosaurs brought to life in ways that had changed cinema. The challenge was no longer convincing people that CGI dinosaurs were possible. The challenge was making them feel dangerous again. That is why the Spinosaurus mattered. A Tyrannosaurus attack had become familiar language. Audiences knew the silhouette. They knew the roar. They knew the suspense pattern. The filmmakers needed a creature that could break those expectations. The Spinosaurus offered exactly that. It was visually distinctive, physically imposing, and unfamiliar to many mainstream viewers. Marketing could turn the creature into an event. Instead of promising another return to the same monster, the film could promise a new predator. The problem was obvious. Jurassic Park had already taught audiences to love the T-Rex. Replacing it was not going to be a neutral decision. The return of Sam Neill helped stabilize the film's identity. Alan Grant was familiar, but he was not the same man audiences remembered. Jeff Goldblum's absence as the primary lead reinforced the sense that this was not simply The Lost World Part 2. Laura Dern returned as Ellie Sattler, but her role was comparatively small. The marketing therefore focused heavily on survival. The island. The missing boy. The Spinosaurus. The raptors. The airplane crash. The aviary. It was a much more straightforward promise than the previous films had made. Come back to Jurassic Park. Run. Hide. survive. That simplicity could be marketed instantly. But it also created a tension with the franchise's reputation. Jurassic Park was supposed to mean something. It was associated with scientific hubris, ethical questions, wonder, and the collision between modern technology and ancient life. Jurassic Park 3 mostly turns those questions into action. That does not mean the ideas disappeared. They simply moved underneath the plot. And that becomes easier to see once Alan Grant is placed at the center of the story. The film begins with Eric's disappearance, and that opening immediately tells us something important. This is not going to be Grant's story because he wants another adventure. It is going to be Grant's story because another person has entered his life through a crisis. Eric is not simply a missing child. He is the person who forces Grant to reconnect with a part of himself that has become buried under years of cynicism. Several years after the events of the first Jurassic Park, Grant has become increasingly frustrated by the public obsession with dinosaurs. The irony is almost perfect. He helped people understand the creatures, but the world turned that knowledge into entertainment. His lectures attract audiences who want stories about monsters rather than lessons about paleontology. Grant is therefore trapped by his own expertise. People want the myth. He wants the science. And the science no longer pays particularly well. That financial pressure is what allows Paul and Amanda Kirby to get through his defenses. They appear wealthy. They offer to fund Grant's research. They propose an aerial tour of Isla Sorna. They present themselves as people with the resources necessary to make the trip safe. Grant knows better. He does not want to go. That hesitation is essential because it prevents the character from becoming another reckless Jurassic protagonist. Grant is not returning because he has forgotten the lesson of the first film. He is returning because life has cornered him into a decision he would otherwise never make. It is one of the movie's more realistic ideas. People rarely walk willingly into their worst memories. Sometimes they are pushed. The island has changed as well. Isla Sorna, Site B, is not the polished theme park of the original movie. It is a place where abandoned human infrastructure has been swallowed by vegetation. Buildings decay. Roads disappear. The jungle becomes a maze. The physical environment reflects the failure of human control. In the first film, the park was an artificial attempt to organize nature into a commercial attraction. On Sorna, that organization has collapsed. The animals remain. The people do not. Grant arrives expecting an aerial survey. Instead, the airplane lands him directly inside a trap. The deception is revealed almost immediately. The Kirbys are not wealthy industrialists funding paleontological research. They are desperate parents looking for their son. They lied because they believed Grant was the only person who could help them. From their perspective, the deception is understandable. From Grant's perspective, it is unforgivable. That conflict gives the opening act its emotional engine. Grant is not angry because the island is dangerous. He is angry because someone used his fear against him. And then the Spinosaurus arrives. The first major dinosaur confrontation is deliberately brutal. The creature does not behave like a conventional movie monster waiting for the heroes to prepare. It attacks with enormous physical force. The environment itself becomes part of the threat as vehicles, metal, water, and trees are transformed into weapons. Then the Tyrannosaurus appears. For a moment, the old hierarchy seems restored. The audience recognizes the creature. The characters recognize the danger. And then the two animals fight. The scene works because the audience is forced to rethink what it believes it knows. The T-Rex has always been the ultimate Jurassic Park predator, but here it becomes part of a larger ecological competition. The Spinosaurus is not simply another dinosaur. It is the new threat. Its victory is controversial precisely because it carries symbolic weight. When the T-Rex dies, a piece of the original Jurassic Park mythology appears to die with it. But from the perspective of the story, the fight establishes something more practical. The humans now know that something on the island is powerful enough to kill the creature they already feared. The Spinosaurus has become a moving boundary. Wherever it goes, survival becomes the only objective. The plane is destroyed. The group is stranded. And the rescue mission becomes a survival mission. That shift is the real beginning of Jurassic Park 3. The characters are no longer tourists. They are prey. Grant's scientific knowledge suddenly becomes valuable in a different way. He cannot simply lecture about dinosaurs. He has to interpret them under pressure. He has to understand behavior, territory, movement, and warning signs. That is why Eric becomes so important. The boy they came to rescue has survived. Not through luck alone. He adapted. Eric has spent months learning how to live inside an environment that should have been impossible for him. His survival system, particularly his use of an overturned vehicle and his knowledge of dinosaur behavior, reveals something that the adults initially failed to understand. The island does not have to be conquered. It has to be read. Eric has learned that lesson instinctively. Grant knows the science behind it. Together, they form an unexpected partnership. That relationship gives the movie an emotional center that is easy to overlook because the film moves so quickly. Grant begins the story detached from children and frustrated by the public's fascination with dinosaurs. Eric is a child who has been forced to become independent far too quickly. Neither character is comfortable with the other. But both recognize something familiar. Eric sees Grant as the adult who understands the creatures. Grant sees Eric as a survivor who understands the island. Their relationship gradually changes from responsibility into trust. And that is where Grant's arc begins. He is not rediscovering wonder. He is rediscovering responsibility. Once Eric is found, the family reunion should provide relief. Instead, it creates a new kind of pressure. Eric can explain what he has seen. He can tell them where danger is. He can explain how he survived. But he cannot make the island safe. The satellite phone becomes another important object because it represents the character's dependence on technology. They believe communication will restore their connection to civilization. Yet every attempt to use technology seems to remind them that technology cannot guarantee control. The phone can call for help. It cannot stop a Spinosaurus. It can locate the group. It cannot make the jungle predictable. That distinction echoes the franchise's larger philosophy. Human tools are useful. Human confidence in those tools is dangerous. As the group moves through Isla Sorna, the island increasingly resembles a living organism rather than a setting. The abandoned structures are reminders of human ambition, but the vegetation and dinosaurs have reclaimed them. The jungle does not look like a park anymore. It looks like a place that has forgotten the park ever existed. That is why the visual language of the movie is often stronger than its screenplay. A ruined structure covered in vegetation communicates the failure of InGen more efficiently than several minutes of exposition could. A dinosaur nest inside an abandoned human facility says everything about who ultimately won the argument over ownership. The island belongs to the animals. The humans are trespassers. This idea becomes even more important when the group encounters the raptors. The Spinosaurus represents physical dominance. The raptors represent intelligence. That distinction is one of the most interesting things about the movie. The raptors are not simply smaller versions of the Spinosaurus. They are a different kind of threat. They coordinate. They communicate. They observe. They appear to remember. The movie's famous raptor dream sequence is therefore more than a surreal joke. It reflects Grant's psychological relationship with these animals. He has spent years studying them, warning people about them, and surviving them. Now the creatures occupy his subconscious. When he dreams of a raptor speaking to him, the film blurs the line between scientific knowledge and personal fear. The joke is absurd. The idea underneath it is not. Grant understands raptors better than almost anyone alive. And that understanding does not make him less afraid. It makes him more aware of what they are capable of. This becomes crucial when the group discovers the missing raptor eggs. The eggs reveal that the humans are not the only ones trying to recover something. The raptors want their offspring. Billy's involvement turns the situation into a moral conflict. He stole the eggs because he believed the scientific value could transform his career. His ambition is understandable. He is young. He wants recognition. He wants to prove that he belongs in Grant's world. But the act also exposes the exact arrogance the franchise has always warned against. Billy sees a living ecosystem and identifies an opportunity. He sees dinosaur eggs. The raptors see their future. That difference is enormous. Grant's disappointment in Billy therefore matters because it is not simply about betrayal. It is about watching someone he mentored repeat the same mistake that humanity has made throughout the Jurassic story. Knowledge creates power. Power creates temptation. And temptation creates consequences. The raptors are now pursuing the group not because they are mindless monsters, but because humans have taken something from them. The movie never needs to turn this into a philosophical speech. The eggs do the talking. They are symbols of continuation. Life. Adaptation. The future. The humans have interfered with that future, and the animals respond. This is where the movie's title becomes unexpectedly meaningful. Jurassic Park 3 is not really about returning to the past. It is about watching an ecosystem continue to evolve without human permission. The dinosaurs are no longer exhibits. They are populations. They reproduce. They adapt. They compete. They occupy abandoned spaces. The humans are the temporary visitors. That is why the aviary sequence is so important. The aviary is one of the film's most visually ambitious locations, but its significance goes beyond spectacle. It is another example of containment failing. The giant enclosure was designed to hold flying dinosaurs, but now the humans are the ones trapped inside. The architecture reverses roles. A structure created to contain animals becomes a cage for people. And the pteranodons become another reminder that the humans do not understand the island's boundaries. The danger can come from the ground. It can come from the water. It can come from the trees. And it can come from above. The group keeps searching for an exit, but every direction leads deeper into the ecosystem. That is what makes the movie's survival structure work. There is no safe route. There is only the route that is less immediately dangerous. Even Grant's knowledge has limits. He can recognize species. He can interpret behavior. He can anticipate certain movements. But he cannot control what happens next. This distinction separates him from the villains of the broader franchise. Grant knows that knowledge is not control. Billy temporarily forgets. The Kirbys never understood it. The raptors never needed to learn it. The island itself demonstrates it constantly. Eventually, the group's exhaustion becomes as dangerous as the dinosaurs. Survival is not simply physical. It is psychological. Fear affects judgment. Grief affects judgment. Guilt affects judgment. Amanda's desperation becomes increasingly frantic. Paul is forced to confront the consequences of his deception. Billy must confront his betrayal. Grant has to decide whether he can trust the people around him. Eric has to stop being the child everyone is protecting and become part of the team. That is why the film's ensemble, despite its limitations, functions as a miniature survival society. Every person represents a different response to crisis. Paul lies. Amanda panics. Billy hides his mistake. Eric adapts. Grant analyzes. The island punishes every response that depends on control. It rewards adaptation. And that leads directly to the final confrontation with the raptors. The eggs become the key. Grant's knowledge of raptor communication gives the survivors a chance, but the scene is deliberately different from the kind of victory we might expect from a conventional monster movie. Grant does not defeat the raptors. He does not overpower them. He does not domesticate them. He gives them what they want. That is the real victory. Communication replaces domination. The humans survive because they finally understand the limits of their own power. The military rescue that follows is almost comically abrupt, but the absurdity fits the movie's compressed structure. After so much desperation, civilization suddenly returns with overwhelming force. The island has not been conquered. The survivors have simply been extracted. That difference matters. The pteranodons leaving the island also complicate the idea of resolution. The characters escape, but the ecological consequences remain. The dinosaurs are not neatly returned to their cages. The world has changed. The island remains alive. And Grant leaves it changed as well. He began the story as a man who wanted to distance himself from dinosaurs and from the public mythology surrounding them. He ends it having rediscovered the practical value of his knowledge and, more importantly, his ability to care about another human being. His relationship with Eric becomes the emotional equivalent of the scientific discoveries that defined his younger self. In the first Jurassic Park, Grant learns to appreciate children. In Jurassic Park 3, he learns to protect one. That may sound like a smaller arc. It is. But it is also more personal. Alan Grant does not need another scientific revelation. He needs a reason to stop living entirely inside his own skepticism. Eric gives him one. And the supporting characters reinforce that transformation. Paul Kirby is introduced as a desperate father willing to deceive a professional because he believes there is no other option. His behavior is selfish, but it is rooted in love. Amanda's emotional instability comes from the same source. Her repeated cries for Alan become comic because the film exaggerates them, but beneath the joke is a mother who has spent months imagining her child dead. That grief makes her difficult. It does not make her empty. Billy Brennan occupies another role entirely. He is the younger scientist standing beside Grant, eager to prove himself. His mistake is not that he wants scientific discovery. It is that he allows ambition to override responsibility. In that sense, Billy is almost a younger version of the people Grant once warned against. He wants to be the person who discovers something extraordinary. He forgets that extraordinary discoveries can have extraordinary consequences. Udesky is quieter, but his presence helps stabilize the group. He is practical, observant, and less interested in pretending the situation is under control. Cooper and Nash serve more traditional survival thriller functions, their deaths emphasizing how quickly the island can erase human plans. The movie's short runtime means these characters cannot receive elaborate arcs. That is one of the screenplay's legitimate weaknesses. Their deaths often generate momentum more than emotional devastation. The film wants us to feel danger immediately, not mourn extensively. This is another reason Jurassic Park 3 feels closer to a creature feature than to a philosophical adventure. And creature features depend on rhythm. Threat. Escape. Temporary safety. New threat. The film repeatedly cycles through that structure. Sometimes it becomes predictable. But the pacing also prevents the movie from collapsing under the weight of its own production problems. Joe Johnston understands movement. His direction keeps the audience physically oriented. Characters run through narrow spaces. Dinosaurs emerge from limited visibility. Water becomes threatening. Vegetation hides movement. Buildings create enclosed environments where the animals feel even larger. The Spinosaurus is particularly effective because the film understands that scale is more frightening when the audience cannot see the entire creature at once. A massive animal behind trees is often scarier than a fully visible digital model. The same principle applies to sound. A dinosaur does not need to be visible to be present. Footsteps through vegetation can establish size. A roar can establish distance. A sudden silence can create anticipation. Water movement can suggest something beneath the surface. Metal collapsing under pressure tells the audience how strong the creature is before they even see it. Jurassic Park 3 uses sound aggressively because its story moves so quickly. There is not always time for elaborate suspense. Sound can create that suspense instantly. The Spinosaurus roar becomes part of its identity. The raptors have their own vocal language. Pteranodons create a different kind of threat because their movement changes the direction from which danger can arrive. The jungle itself becomes an acoustic environment. This is one reason the movie can still feel physical despite its age. The visual effects were a major collaborative effort between ILM and Stan Winston Studio. CGI was used for large-scale digital creatures and visual effects augmentation, while practical animatronics gave major dinosaurs physical presence. That hybrid approach was essential. The Spinosaurus was not simply a computer-generated character. Stan Winston's studio constructed a major animatronic representation, allowing actors to interact with a physical creature during important sequences. Hydraulic systems, puppetry, mechanical movement, and digital enhancement were combined to produce something that occupied the same visual world as the actors. The effect is subtle. You do not consciously think, that dinosaur is practical. You simply feel that it has weight. Its head moves through space. Its body reacts to the environment. Its interaction with vehicles has physical consequences. The aircraft sequence benefits particularly from this approach. When the creature attacks the plane, the environment shakes and breaks. The characters react to something that appears to possess actual mass. That physicality separates much of the film from modern digital spectacle, where enormous creatures can sometimes feel almost weightless because every element of the environment is synthetic. Jurassic Park 3 arrived in 2001, only 8 years after the original Jurassic Park, but the technology had already advanced considerably. Digital creatures could be more complex. Skin could move differently. Muscles could be suggested more convincingly. Animatronics could perform more sophisticated actions. ILM's work in Stan Winston's creature construction existed in partnership rather than competition. That combination is one reason the dinosaurs remain among the movie's most durable elements. The raptors benefit from practical puppetry as well. Their movements are not simply generated by software. Puppeteers coordinate physical bodies, heads, tails, and gestures to create the illusion of intelligent animals. The result is especially effective when the raptors are close to the actors. They feel present. They feel capable of thinking. And that matters because their threat is psychological rather than purely physical. The Spinosaurus scares you because it is huge. The raptors scare you because they are clever. The pteranodons provide another visual challenge. Their sequences require digital effects, physical interaction, environmental integration, and convincing flight. The aviary is therefore a showcase for early 2000s creature filmmaking. It is not flawless. Some CGI shots reveal their age. Certain compositing choices are more obvious today. But the practical foundation keeps many sequences convincing. That is why the film can look dated and timeless at the same time. Its technology belongs to 2001. Its physical filmmaking still works. Johnston's directorial vision reinforces that physicality. Instead of imitating Spielberg's slower suspense, he creates a movie that often behaves like an action thriller. The camera moves. The characters move. The creatures move. The story moves. The shorter runtime is therefore not simply a limitation. It becomes part of the film's personality. Jurassic Park 3 does not ask the audience to settle into a sprawling adventure. It asks them to survive 90 minutes. That is why its episodic structure can sometimes feel like a flaw and a strength simultaneously. Each sequence resembles another survival challenge in a dangerous ecosystem. The story is not always deepening dramatically, but it is escalating physically. That is a legitimate B-movie strategy. And Jurassic Park 3 is arguably at its best when it stops trying to be more than that. Its greatest weakness appears when the audience expects the complexity of the first movie. Its greatest strength appears when the film simply says, "Here is a dinosaur. Run." Don Davis faced a similar challenge with the music. John Williams' Jurassic Park themes had become musical mythology. They were not merely pieces of a score. They were associated with wonder itself. The main theme could make an audience feel the enormous emotional significance of seeing dinosaurs alive. Davis therefore had an impossible assignment. He needed to create new music for a new movie while carrying the emotional memory of the original. The solution was not to erase Williams. It was to preserve enough of the established musical identity that the audience still felt connected to the franchise. But Davis also introduced more aggressive action material. The music is often less about wonder and more about movement. It accelerates. It pushes. It creates pressure. This difference mirrors the movie itself. Jurassic Park's music often asked us to marvel. Jurassic Park 3's music often asks us to survive. That change is easy to overlook because the familiar themes continue to appear, but emotionally it is significant. The original musical language belongs to discovery. The third film's new material belongs to pursuit. When Grant and Eric are moving through dangerous territory, the score helps maintain momentum. During creature attacks, orchestration intensifies the sense of physical threat. During quieter moments, the music can briefly reconnect the movie to the emotional memory of the earlier films. Davis therefore acts as a bridge. He respects the mythology without allowing the score to become purely nostalgic. Sound design performs an equally important function. The audience often hears danger before seeing it. That is one of the oldest tricks in horror, but it works particularly well with dinosaurs because size can be communicated acoustically. A footstep does not need to be shown if the sound suggests something enormous has just moved nearby. Leaves shifting can create anticipation. Water can hide a threat. Metal can amplify impact. Silence can be even more effective than noise. The absence of sound tells the audience that something is about to happen. Jurassic Park 3 understands that a dinosaur becomes frightening when the audience cannot fully locate it. That principle is especially effective in the Spinosaurus sequences. The creature is often partially obscured. The jungle becomes a visual barrier. The characters cannot see enough. The audience cannot see enough. And uncertainty becomes the real source of fear. That approach connects the movie to classic survival horror. The island is not frightening because everything is visible. It is frightening because everything is hidden. By the time Jurassic Park 3 reached theaters in July 2001, expectations were enormous. The franchise had become one of Hollywood's most recognizable properties. The audience wanted dinosaurs, but they also wanted another experience worthy of the name Jurassic Park. Critics were largely unconvinced. The film's critical reception was mixed, with Rotten Tomatoes currently listing a 49% Tomatometer score. Metacritic lists a score of 42 out of 100 based on 30 critics. CinemaScore audiences gave the film a B-. Those numbers tell a revealing story. The movie was not universally hated. It was not universally loved. It occupied the uncomfortable middle ground of being considered entertaining but dramatically thin. Many criticisms focused on the screenplay. The characters were underdeveloped. The plot was simple. The action could feel repetitive. The film lacked Spielberg's sense of wonder. The replacement of the T-Rex became a major point of debate. Yet even many negative reactions acknowledged the movie's efficiency as a thrill ride. That distinction matters. Critics were evaluating a Jurassic Park sequel. Some viewers were simply watching a dinosaur movie. Those are not necessarily the same experience. If Jurassic Park 3 is judged against the original, it loses. Almost inevitably. The original changed blockbuster cinema. It combined scientific ideas, character development, horror, humor, awe, and technological innovation into a remarkably cohesive experience. Jurassic Park 3 is not trying to do all of that. It is trying to get Alan Grant and a family off an island. That does not excuse weak writing. But it changes the standard by which the film can be appreciated. Roger Ebert's relatively positive response captured part of this distinction. He recognized the movie's function as a thrill machine rather than demanding that it reproduce the philosophical ambitions of Spielberg's original. That perspective explains why the movie has developed a different reputation over time. Younger viewers who encountered Jurassic Park 3 through television, DVDs, streaming, toys, games, or online fandom often did not experience it as a failed sequel. They experienced it as Jurassic Park 3. That difference is enormous. For a child who watched the Spinosaurus emerge from the trees, the movie was not a disappointing replacement for something else. It was the movie where the Spinosaurus existed. The early 2000s cultural environment also helped cement that memory. Jurassic Park merchandise was everywhere. Toys transformed the dinosaurs into collectible creatures. Video games allowed players to interact with the franchise in different ways. Posters and trailers made the Spinosaurus instantly recognizable. The film became part of a particular generation's childhood vocabulary. That generation eventually grew old enough to revisit it. And nostalgia has a complicated relationship with criticism. Nostalgia does not make a flawed screenplay better. But it can reveal which elements mattered emotionally. The Spinosaurus remained memorable. The raptors remained memorable. The aviary remained memorable. Alan Grant remained memorable. Even Amanda's repeated shouting of his name became memorable. The movie's imperfections became part of its identity. Online fandom amplified this process. Debates over the T-Rex versus Spinosaurus fight became recurring discussions among dinosaur fans. YouTube ranking videos revisited the original trilogy. Forums and social media allowed fans to argue over dinosaur matchups, creature designs, and the movie's place in the franchise. Later Jurassic films changed the context again. Once the series returned with Jurassic World and expanded into a much larger cinematic universe, Jurassic Park 3 no longer stood alone as the final chapter of a declining trilogy. It became part of Jurassic history. And historical distance can be strangely generous. A movie once criticized for being too simple can look refreshing after years of increasingly enormous franchise storytelling. A 91-minute dinosaur survival movie can suddenly feel efficient. There is no sprawling mythology to keep track of. No giant park full of attractions. No attempt to constantly raise the stakes beyond the previous movie. Just an island. A boy. A paleontologist. a family, some eggs, and several dinosaurs that would very much like everyone to leave. That is not a masterpiece. But it is a clear identity. The film's biggest controversy remains the T-Rex and Spinosaurus confrontation. From a franchise perspective, replacing the T-Rex with another predator was risky. From a storytelling perspective, it is easy to understand. If the T-Rex remains unbeatable forever, the franchise becomes predictable. If every new predator is introduced merely to lose to the same creature, the ecosystem becomes a hierarchy rather than a living system. The Spinosaurus destroys that hierarchy. Whether its victory is scientifically defensible in every detail is almost beside the point. The movie needs the audience to believe that the old rules no longer apply. The Spinosaurus is the visual announcement of that change. It represents escalation. But the raptors represent evolution. That distinction is more important than the debate over which dinosaur would win. The Spinosaurus is powerful because of physical dominance. The raptors are dangerous because of adaptation. And humans are trapped between the two. That is the deeper conflict of Jurassic Park 3. Every human attempt to control the island creates a new problem. The Kirbys believe money can buy access. Billy believes science can justify taking the eggs. Grant believes knowledge can help him predict behavior. But none of them can command the ecosystem. The island does not care about their intentions. It responds to actions. That idea connects the movie to the wider Jurassic franchise. The dinosaurs are never truly the villains. They are animals. Dangerous animals. But animals nonetheless. The real antagonistic force is human overconfidence. That overconfidence appears in different forms. Corporate ambition. Scientific curiosity. Financial desperation. Parental desperation. Even intellectual certainty. The difference between Grant and the others is that Grant has already learned humility. He knows what dinosaurs can do. He knows what humans cannot control. He knows that survival depends on recognizing limits. That is why his relationship with Eric becomes so meaningful. Eric survives because he learns the island's rules. Grant survives because he knows how to interpret those rules. Together, they demonstrate that intelligence is not about domination. It is about adaptation. That theme becomes even clearer when the island's visual symbolism is considered. Human buildings are abandoned. Vegetation consumes roads. Dinosaur nests occupy spaces built for people. The aviary no longer functions as containment. The jungle covers the evidence of human activity. Isla Sorna has transformed from production facility into ecosystem. The humans came there to manufacture dinosaurs. The dinosaurs stayed. That reversal is the visual heart of the movie. The abandoned InGen infrastructure is almost a monument to failed control. Humanity attempted to build an artificial environment. Nature reclaimed it. The satellite phone represents another side of the same conflict. It is a tool that connects the characters to civilization, but it cannot make the island civilized. Eric's survival shelter is more useful because it is adapted to the environment rather than imposed upon it. This creates an understated contrast. Human technology asks the environment to cooperate. Eric learns to cooperate with the environment. The difference is survival. The raptor eggs add another layer. They represent continuity. The dinosaurs are not simply remnants of the past. They have a future. Their population is continuing. Their behavior is changing. The franchise calls them Jurassic because they come from the ancient past, but on Isla Sorna they are no longer fossils. They are living participants in an evolving ecosystem. That makes the question of who belongs on the island particularly interesting. The humans think they are returning to something they created. But the animals no longer need the humans. So who is actually invading whose world? The question is never spoken directly. It does not need to be. Every abandoned building answers it. Every dinosaur nest answers it. Every human who runs for his life answers it. By the time the survivors reach the final stage of escape, the movie has quietly reversed the original premise. In Jurassic Park, humans bring dinosaurs into their world. In Jurassic Park 3, humans enter the dinosaurs' world. And they lose. They lose their plane. They lose their supplies. They lose their sense of control. They lose people. They lose their confidence. The only thing they can preserve is each other. That is why the ending is so different from the first film. Jurassic Park ends with the characters leaving Isla Nublar after surviving a catastrophic collapse of the park. The emotional emphasis is on escape from a failed experiment. Jurassic Park 3 ends with something more ambiguous. The island remains. The animals remain. The pteranodons escape. The system is not restored. The humans simply get away. That is the film's definition of victory. Not conquest. Survival. And survival is also the business story of the movie itself. Jurassic Park 3 was expensive, with the numbers listing a production budget of about $93 million. Its worldwide box office was approximately $365.9 million, including roughly $181.2 million domestically and $184.7 million internationally. The opening weekend was around $50.8 million. Those numbers matter because they complicate the idea that the movie was a commercial failure. It was not. The film made substantial money. Universal's franchise remained valuable. Audiences still wanted dinosaurs. The problem was not whether Jurassic Park could make money. The problem was whether the creative formula could continue indefinitely. That is a different question. Recognizable intellectual property can survive mixed reviews because audiences are already invested in the concept. A Jurassic Park movie does not need to invent the idea of dinosaurs. The dinosaurs are the idea. That creates both enormous commercial power and enormous creative pressure. The studio knows what audiences want. Audiences know what they expect. The challenge becomes finding a new way to deliver it. Jurassic Park 3's answer was speed. It made the movie shorter. It made the threats more immediate. It introduced a new predator. It reduced the philosophical complexity. It focused on survival. And commercially, the strategy worked well enough. But creatively, the franchise reached a crossroads. The original trilogy had effectively exhausted its first-generation formula. Alan Grant had returned. Ian Malcolm had returned in the previous film. Isla Nublar and Isla Sorna had both been explored. Dinosaurs had escaped controlled environments. The audience had seen the consequences. The next chapter would need something more than another rescue mission. That process eventually led to the long development period that preceded Jurassic World. Spielberg remained connected to the franchise as a producer, while Joe Johnston did not return as director. The series would eventually move toward a new generation of characters and a much larger concept. Jurassic World would transform the premise again. Instead of asking what happens when humans accidentally create a dinosaur park, it would ask what happens when humans successfully create one and then discover that success has made the experience boring. That is a fascinating evolution. The first Jurassic Park warns about creating dinosaurs. Jurassic World warns about creating dinosaurs that are not impressive enough. Jurassic Park 3 sits between those ideas. It is the transitional film. It demonstrates that spectacle still works. But it also demonstrates that spectacle alone has limits. This is why its historical importance is greater than its reputation suggests. It was the third chapter of one of the defining blockbuster franchises of its era. It continued the collaboration between ILM and Stan Winston. It showcased advances in creature animation and practical effects. It gave the franchise one of its most recognizable new dinosaurs. It preserved Alan Grant as a central part of Jurassic mythology. It did not need to be the best movie to matter. Its importance comes partly from what it reveals about Hollywood's relationship with successful intellectual property. A franchise behaves like an ecosystem too. It adapts to audience demand. It competes with its own history. It mutates. Sometimes the mutation is successful. Sometimes it produces something awkward. Sometimes the awkward version survives long enough to become nostalgic. Jurassic Park 3 is that kind of movie. It is the fossil record of a franchise in transition. And its visual effects make that transition visible. Compare the creatures of 1993 with those of 2001 and the progress becomes obvious. The original Jurassic Park had already revolutionized the use of digital creatures, but by the time Jurassic Park 3 arrived, filmmakers could create more complex movements, more convincing digital augmentation, and larger interactions between creatures and environments. The Spinosaurus is physically complicated. The pteranodons require aerial integration. The raptors move with detailed physicality. Water, foliage, structures, and creatures interact in increasingly sophisticated ways. Yet the film's visual effects achievement is not simply that it looks more advanced. It is that the filmmakers still understood the value of practical effects. That lesson remains relevant. A digital creature can look spectacular. A physical creature can feel present. Jurassic Park 3 often uses both. That hybrid approach is one reason the movie remains watchable decades later. Of course, not everything has aged equally well. Some CGI shots clearly belong to 2001. Certain digital movements look less convincing when compared with modern effects. Some dialogue feels aggressively early 2000s. The comedy can be broad. The characters sometimes function as archetypes rather than fully developed people. Amanda's repeated emotional outbursts are memorable, but not always sophisticated. Billy's redemption arrives quickly. Ellie's role is so brief that it can feel like a reminder of the previous movie rather than an essential part of this one. And the family dynamics are simplified because the movie has so little time.